Haha, you thought this series was done, but nope. It's not done. We still have a few more of these to get through. It's just there have been so many other topics that have popped up that I thought were interesting enough to talk about, so this entire What Happened series has kind of taken a little bit of a step back. But guess what? I'm going out there and pre-planning videos for a trip I'm going to be taking on the weekend, so it's time to go out there and bring out the novelty topics, as they say. And in this video, we're going over the entire NBC draft comparable game once again, as we take a look at a prospect from the 2017 draft, and we see where his comparison, there you go, that's the proper word. We'll see how his comparison stacks up a few years after the draft was made. Today we're talking about Edmonton Oilers forward Kailer Yamamoto, who had made the news recently because he signed a contract extension with the Oilers at $3.1 million a season for 2 years. Now, Yamamoto is a guy that I think is a pretty good NHL player, but if you go back into 2017 and you look at the NBC draft show, it appears that a lot of the folks over on the broadcast were a lot higher on Yamamoto than I appear to be today. Let's go over the profile before we talk about the draft program over here. Kailer Yamamoto was one of the oldest players in the entire 2017 NHL Draft, born September 29th, 1998. He's currently 23 years old, born in Spokane, 5'8", 152 as a right-handed forward. He plays wing, he plays center, he plays all forward positions according to Elite Prospects. However, for this upcoming season, he will most likely go out there and battle Jesse Puljujärvi for the final right-wing spot on the top 6. With a team that has the likes of Evander Kane, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Zach Hyman, you have yourselves one more spot available for either Jesse or Kailer. We're just going to have to wait and see where the dominoes fall. Kailer Yamamoto was drafted in the 2017 draft 22nd overall by the Oilers after being ranked to go a little bit higher by some and around that same range by others. Futures iterations had him at 15th overall, ISS had him at 26, McKeen's and TSN and Bob McKenzie had him at 24 each. There was no doubt that Yamamoto was a good player. He had 99 points in 65 games played that season, but he was only 5'8", and he's not really the heaviest guy in the world either. Future considerations back in that time frame said, Yamamoto was a small, speedy forward with excellent hockey sense and quick hands. He has a strong work ethic that keeps him going. Below the goal line, Yamamoto is elusive and can carve his way to the net using extremely strong outside edges, hockeyprospect.com said back in that time frame as well. There always was some good offense and good pizzazz with Yamamoto in his game. It's just a question as to whether or not he would be able to translate as he gets to higher levels of hockey. The Oilers tried him out in Edmonton for 9 games in the sample that he had the year after he got drafted. He had 3 points, but he got sent back down to Spokane later in the year. Give it a few more seasons, bouncing up between the AHL and the NHL, and eventually Kailer Yamamoto had himself a point-per-game stint in 2019-20 with 26 points and 27 games played. Now this is an absolutely crazy year. I believe he was playing with Draisaitl at that time, and everything was really clicking. I know it's easy to go out there and say, hey, Lego, I would be a point-per-game player if I played with Leon Draisaitl, but Yamamoto was going out there on his entry-level deal, doing fantastic things for the Oilers, and a lot of people were super hyped up to see where he would go in the future because of it. Albeit, though, in the 2020 bubble playoffs, Yamamoto had 0 points in the 4-game sample the Oilers had against the Chicago Blackhawks, and at this point in the summer, a lot of people were starting to say, okay, he had a really good regular season, but the playoffs were not all too great. We'll just see what he does next year. Well, in 2020-2021, Yamamoto had 21 points in 52 games played and 1 point in the 4-game sample he had in the postseason. Not great. The season after that, though, he actually improved a little bit, getting 41 points, 20 goals, 21 assists in 81 games. He also was half a point a game in the postseason as the Oilers went to the 3rd round against the Colorado Avalanche. Now, you could clearly see that there have been some ups and some downs, some really good years followed by some pretty meh years, followed up by some pretty okay years as well. It's why the entire contract negotiation process as an RFA was very interesting into seeing where the Oilers would go with Yamamoto, whether they would stay with him long term, give him an amount of money that was like, okay, we think you can be better than what you've shown off so far. Here's $5 million by 6 years or whatever. let's see if we could go out there and try this. Obviously, I'm just spitting, pulling numbers out of thin air, but there was also the opposing position saying, hey, Yamamoto has not really been as consistent as we would have liked him to be. I would be okay if the Oilers went with a short-term deal, let's say a bridge deal, sign him on for a prove-it kind of year, and see what he's able to do when given a chance to fight for a top 6 spot with Jesse Puljujärvi. That is what we're going to be seeing heading into 2022-2023, but I wanted to turn your attention back over here to Gorilus on Twitter. This is the user that posted the random NBC draft comparisons that they found interesting. I like this post a lot because it goes over a lot of the older drafts and it goes over the draft program, and if you were watching the NHL Draft back in 2017, you would have seen these comparisons made on your TV screen. When Kailer Yamamoto was drafted by the Oilers, the comparison right here was Johnny Gaudreau, then of the Calgary Flames, currently of the Columbus Blue Jackets, and it's really interesting just seeing why this one was made. Now, it doesn't take a genius to see why Yamamoto was compared to Gaudreau. I mean, Johnny Gaudreau is the pinnacle of sub-5'10" forwards that are skilled, playmaky, dangly, and highly offensively capable. It's just Gaudreau ended up being one of the top point scorers in the entire NHL. Now, it's difficult to go out there and find any comparison for a guy like Yamamoto that isn't really Johnny Gaudreau because, like, how many players like Johnny Gaudreau are there in the NHL today? There's only really Gaudreau, and I guess you could say Yamamoto in some respect. But you gotta remember, this was back in 2017, when the NHL was still transitioning towards that idea that smaller, faster players could actually succeed in the league, and Johnny Gaudreau had his rookie season only 2 years prior to this draft. He was in the NHL for the first time in 2014-15. He had 64 points in 80 games. He was also an incredible NCAA athlete, being a double point-per-game player in 2013-14, 3 seasons after he had been drafted by the Flames in the 4th round in 2011. So for Johnny Gaudreau, he really is like the exception, not the norm, when it comes to how good he was as a prospect. And it is really interesting, though, when you kind of acknowledge where the NBC guys were coming from when you compared Yamamoto to Gaudreau back in 2017. You see, when Gaudreau was drafted, he was a stud, an over-point-per-game player for the Dubuque Fighting Saints in the USHL, the junior league in the USA. He had 72 points in 60 games. However, 10 years ago, the USHL wasn't all too valued for scouting as it is today, and Gaudreau still was a pretty small guy. So, for Yamamoto to have 99 points in 65 games as a Spokane Chief in his draft year, while being the same size roughly, it made a lot of scouts go out there and say, hey, that Johnny Gaudreau guy kind of has a similar profile and he's doing really well. In 2016-17, the time when Yamamoto was drafted, Johnny Gaudreau had just put up, 61 points in 72 games? He was coming off a season the prior year where he had 78 points. I mean, Gaudreau became an absolute stud really quickly in the NHL. It's just very unfortunate that Yamamoto has not really had that same level of immediate success. Now, Gaudreau is a better player. We're going to go out there and not try to disagree on that. But for Yamamoto, there definitely are some similar stylistic comparisons that you can make here. It's just a question as to whether or not the ceiling is as high as the realm that Johnny Gaudreau lives in at all. Kailer Yamamoto is still going to have to battle for a top 6 spot. Meanwhile, Johnny Gaudreau is probably going to be guaranteed to getting at least a point per game in the upcoming season with the Columbus Blue Jackets, maybe even over 100 points again if he plays with Patrik Laine, and Laine goes out there and snipes 50 goals. Who really knows? There's a lot of opportunity here for Johnny Gaudreau to get points, and with his 40-goal campaign last season being a career high in goals, he is getting up there when it comes to his own production as well. So, at the end of the day, Kailer Yamamoto being compared to Johnny Gaudreau, it makes a lot of sense when you take a look at the individual skills, but the ceiling is in a completely different realm, and I don't want to go out there and insinuate that Yamamoto has a 115-point ceiling in the NHL because I really just don't see that happening anytime soon. I think if you had to go out there and force me, twisted my arm into making a bet, I'd say that if everything goes right for Yamamoto, he probably maxes out as a 60, 70, maybe a 75-point guy. Like, I feel like I'm being a tad pessimistic there because I know a lot of Oilers fans do like Yamamoto, and I do too, for sure. It's just whether or not he's going to be able to put it all together, you know? Johnny Gaudreau put it together right away, and he was fantastic. He was a double point-per-game player in the NCAA, which is a men's league already, before making his NHL debut, so it's a completely separate world, I feel. And so, talk in the comments all your thoughts about the NBC draft comparison made between Kailer Yamamoto and Johnny Gaudreau back from 2017. Do you think it's still a similar stylistic comparison that warrants the discussion? Or do you think it's complete bullocks and the NBC crew is just going out there trying to find anybody that's under 5'10 that's in the NHL and trying to say that, yeah, Yamamoto plays like that guy? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this Juraj 9, and bye.